The bullet punched through Petty Officer Nash's deltoid at 2,847 feet per second. He dropped like a marionette with severed strings, his body crumpling into the knee-deep snow as arterial blood painted the white powder in spreading crimson. Staff Sergeant Cole Rayner dug behind a granite outcropping as the second round cracked overhead, close enough to part the frozen air beside his ear. Contact. Sniper. 600-plus meters, northeast ridge. Lieutenant Marcus Hale pressed his body flat against a frozen boulder, his breath coming in ragged clouds. Around him, his 8-man SEAL team scrambled for cover in a valley that had become a killing ground. Snow swirled in 40-knot gusts, visibility dropping to 15 meters. And somewhere above them, somewhere in that wall of white chaos, a shooter was systematically ending their lives. Another crack. Ortiz screamed and went down, shrapnel from a fragmentation grenade tearing into his side where his vest had failed to cover. Ortiz is hit. Ortiz is hit. We're pinned. 3 sides, maybe 4. I can't see anything. I can't see the shooter. Hale's radio crackled with static. The extraction bird was 40 minutes out, 40 minutes they did not have. His ammunition counter showed 63 rounds remaining for the entire team. His tactical display had gone dark 6 minutes ago. GPS signal lost to the storm and the terrain. They were going to die on this mountain. Every man in that valley knew it. And then Cole Rayner heard something that made no tactical sense whatsoever. Through the chaos of suppressing fire and wounded screams and howling wind, he heard a zipper. He turned his head and saw the rookie medic kneeling in the snow, completely exposed, completely calm, her medical pack open before her. But she wasn't reaching for gauze or tourniquets or morphine injectors. Her fingers were working at the false bottom of the bag, at a concealed compartment that should not have existed. Petty Officer Evelyn Cross pulled out a rifle stock, then a barrel, then a scope that gleamed with the cold precision of something that cost more than a sergeant's annual salary. Cole Rayner's brain refused to process what he was seeing. 6 weeks. She'd been with them 6 weeks. A field medic. A rookie who startled at sudden noises and kept her head down in briefings and never once fired a weapon during training exercises. She locked the components together with the fluid muscle memory of someone who had done this 10,000 times. The rifle materialized in her hands like it had always been there, like it had been waiting for this moment. Her gray eyes lifted to meet his. "I need 40 meters of open ground," she said. Her voice was flat, clinical, utterly without fear. "That outcropping on the northwest face gives me angle on his position. I can make the shot." Cole stared at her. "Who the hell are you?" The woman who called herself Evelyn Cross chambered around with a smooth motion that belonged on a special operations range, not in the hands of a medical corpsman. "Someone who should have stayed dead," she said, and then she ran. "If that opening hooked you, trust me, this story only gets more intense." Subscribe now for more real stories of courage like this, and hit that notification bell. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. Now, let me take you back to where it all began, 6 hours earlier, when none of them knew the rookie medic was about to become the most dangerous person on the mountain. Firebase Kodiak smelled like burnt coffee and gun oil, the permanent olfactory signature of forward operating bases that had been running hot for too long. Lieutenant Marcus Hale stood at the front of Briefing Room Charlie, his tactical display throwing cold blue light across the faces of 7 exhausted men who should have been rotating home in 72 hours. Instead, they were looking at satellite imagery of a mountain range that had killed better teams than theirs. "Valken Ridge," Hale said, tapping the display. 48 hours ago, 3 American contractors were grabbed from a security convoy 17 clicks south of here. DOD confirmation came through 6 hours ago. They're alive, probably, but the weather window is closing fast. We have 6 hours from wheels up to reach the target compound, execute extraction, and make it back to LZ Bravo before the storm system buries everything under 12 feet of snow. Staff Sergeant Cole Rayner studied the topographical overlay with the practiced eye of a man who had survived 18 deployments across 4 continents. The terrain was brutal. Narrow valleys choked with boulder fields, exposed ridgelines that offered no cover, steep approaches that would exhaust even conditioned operators. "Enemy strength?" he asked. "Unknown. Satellite shows between 15 and 25 hostiles, but the cloud cover has been degrading imagery for the last 36 hours. We're going in partially blind. Row! Weapons free on confirmed combatants. Primary objective is the 3 contractors. Secondary is intelligence extraction from the compound. Tertiary is eliminating hostile leadership if opportunity presents. Hale paused, his jaw tightening slightly. There's one more thing. Command is attaching a medical corpsman to our element. She'll be inserting with us. The room's temperature dropped 10 degrees. A corpsman, Cole repeated slowly. On a direct action hostage rescue in hostile mountain terrain during a blizzard. Petty Officer Evelyn Cross. 6 weeks in country. Field medic qualification from Pendleton. Command wants medical support embedded in case the contractors require immediate stabilization. Sir, with respect, we don't babysit. She's not your responsibility, Sergeant. She stays with the rear element during the breach. If casualties occur, she does her job. Otherwise, she's a piece of equipment you don't have to think about. Cole's expression made clear exactly what he thought about bringing a 6-week rookie into a hot extraction, but military discipline held his tongue. He nodded once, sharply, and turned his attention back to the tactical display. The door to briefing room Charlie opened, and Evelyn Cross stepped inside. She was 5'6", dark hair pulled back in a regulation knot, gray eyes that moved across the room with a quick assessment of someone cataloging exits, threats, and cover positions. Her medical pack hung from her right shoulder. Oversized, Cole noticed, heavier than standard loadout for a field corpsman. She nodded to Lieutenant Hale and took a position against the back wall, saying nothing. Cole watched her for a long moment. There was something wrong about her stillness. Rookies fidgeted. Rookies checked their gear obsessively. Rookies radiated nervous energy like heat signatures on thermal imaging. Evelyn Cross stood with the absolute motionless composure of a predator waiting for prey to move first. Continuing, Hale said, pulling attention back to the briefing. Insertion via UH-60 at 0430. Fast rope descent into the valley here, 800 meters from a compound. We move in 2 fire teams. Alpha takes the north approach. Bravo flanks from the southeast. Breach is simultaneous. Nash, you're on the door. Cole, you've got interior overwatch. The briefing continued for another 40 minutes. Contingency plans, communication protocols, extraction timing, emergency rally points. Cole kept half his attention on the tactical details and half on the woman in the back of the room. She never moved, never shifted her weight, never reached for water or adjusted her pack or checked her watch. She simply watched and waited. When the briefing ended, the team filed out toward the equipment bay. Cole lingered, catching Evelyn's arm as she moved toward the door. Cross. She turned, her gray eyes meeting his with an expression that gave away absolutely nothing. Staff Sergeant. 6 weeks in country. How many combat insertions? This will be my first Staff Sergeant. Ever fired a weapon outside a training range? No, Staff Sergeant. Ever seen a man die? The pause was so brief that Cole almost missed it. Almost. No, Staff Sergeant. She was lying. He knew it with the bone-deep certainty of 18 years in special operations. But he couldn't prove it, and the mission brief was locked, and in 4 hours they would be dropping into a mountain range that didn't care about personnel disputes. Stay behind us, Cole said. Stay quiet. Stay down. If shooting starts, you find the deepest cover available, and you do not move until someone tells you it's clear. Understood. Understood, Staff Sergeant. She walked out of the briefing room. And Cole stood alone in the blue glow of the tactical display, trying to name the thing that was bothering him. It took him 3 hours to realize what it was. He had seen that kind of stillness before. That perfect predatory calm. That absolute conservation of motion and energy. He had seen it in snipers. The UH-60 Blackhawk lifted off from Fire Base Kodiak at 0428, 2 minutes ahead of schedule. Inside the cargo bay, 8 SEALs ran final equipment checks while the helicopter climbed toward the cloud layer that would hide their approach. Cole sat across from Evelyn Cross, watching her in the red combat lighting. Her medical pack rested between her knees, and her hands lay flat on her thighs. No nervous drumming, no fidgeting, no white-knuckle grip on the safety straps. Nash leaned over, shouting to be heard above the rotor wash. First combat drop, Doc? Evelyn turned her head slightly, acknowledging him. Yes, You scared? The helicopter hit turbulence, lurching sideways. Every operator in the bay shifted their weight instinctively, compensating. Evelyn Cross didn't move at all. No, she said. Nash laughed and turned back to his gear check, dismissing her as either a liar or a fool. Cole didn't laugh. He was watching her hands. They weren't shaking. 26 minutes into the flight, the pilot's voice crackled through the headsets. Approaching insertion point. Visibility degrading fast. I'm showing 30 meters and dropping. We've got maybe 90 seconds on station before I have to pull up. Hale gave the signal. The team moved to the doors. Fast ropes deployed into the swirling white chaos below. Go, go, go. One by one, the operators slid into the storm, disappearing into the blizzard. Cole went forth, feeling the rope burn through his gloves as gravity pulled him down. He hit the snow hard, immediately dropping to a knee and bringing his rifle up to scan the tree line. Nothing. Visibility was dropping below 20 meters. The wind screamed across the valley like something alive and angry. And then Evelyn Cross landed beside him, absorbing the impact with her knees and rolling smoothly into a crouch. Her medical pack was secured against her back, and in her hands was a standard issue M4 that she held with textbook perfect form. Cole stared at her for half a second. That wasn't how a 6-week medic handled a weapon. That was how an operator handled a weapon. Moving. Hale's voice cut through the radio. Alpha element on me. Bravo. Take your positions. The team began its approach through the knee-deep snow, visibility dropping to 15 meters, then 10. The world became a wall of white punctuated by the dark shapes of boulders and the skeletal fingers of dead trees. Cole took point, his rifle sweeping in controlled arcs. Behind him, the team moved in a staggered column. Nash, then Ortiz, then Vickers, then the lieutenant, then the rest. And at the rear, moving with the silent efficiency of a ghost, Evelyn Cross. The first sign of trouble came 12 minutes into the patrol. Cole held up a fist, and the column froze. Boot prints, he said into his radio. Fresh, less than an hour old, moving parallel to our approach vector. Silence on the channel. Everyone understood what that meant. Someone knew they were coming. Hale moved forward, kneeling beside Cole to examine the prints. The snow was filling them in fast, but the pattern was unmistakable. Military boots, spaced evenly, disciplined movement. Could be a patrol, Hale said quietly. Could be coincidence. There are no coincidences on a mountain, sir. Hale's jaw tightened. He keyed his radio. All elements, maintain spacing. Continue approach. Stay alert. They pushed forward, and the valley began to narrow. Granite walls rose on either side, channeling them into a natural corridor that offered no flanking options and limited cover. Cole felt the hair on the back of his neck rise, the ancient instinct to prey recognizing a trap before the conscious mind caught up. Sir, I don't like this terrain. Noted, Sergeant. We don't have another route. We could fall back. Approach from the first shot came from 620 meters away, traveling at 2,847 feet per second. It struck Nash in the left deltoid, spinning him sideways and dropping him into the snow before the crack of the rifle even reached their ears. Contact! The valley erupted. Muzzle flashes lit the ridgelines. 3 positions, maybe 4, all at elevated angles that turned the SEAL team into targets in a shooting gallery. Rounds snapped overhead, kicking up snow and sparking off granite. Cover! Find cover! Cole dug behind a boulder, pulling Nash with him. Blood was pumping from the deltoid wound in arterial spurts. Bad, but survivable if they could control the bleeding. He ripped open his individual first aid kit, jamming gauze into the entry wound. Corpseman up. Evelyn Cross materialized beside him, already moving. Her hands were steady as she took over from Cole, applying a tourniquet above the wound with the speed of someone who had done this 100 times before. Through and through, she said calmly. Missed a bone. He's got a 6-hour window before we need to worry about the arm. Another burst of automatic fire raked their position. Cole returned fire blindly, unable to see the enemy through the storm. I count 3 firing positions. Northeast ridge, 700 meters. Negative, there's a 4th. Due north, elevated. Where's the sniper? That first shot came from a precision rifle, and then Vickers screamed. The grenade had come from somewhere in the chaos, a fragmentation round that detonated 4 meters from his position. Shrapnel caught him in the femoral region, slicing through the gap between his body armor and his thigh plate. Vickers is down. Vickers is down. Evelyn was already moving, low crawling through the snow toward the wounded man. Cole watched her go, laying suppressing fire toward the muzzle flashes on the ridge, burning through ammunition they couldn't afford to waste. I can't see the sniper. Nash was screaming, his voice tight with pain. That first shot, where did it come from? Cole scanned a ridgeline through his optic, searching for the telltale signature of a precision shooter. Nothing. The snow was too thick, the visibility too degraded. They were fighting blind against an enemy who could see everything. Another crack. This time the bullet hit Hale's radius, shattering the bone in his shooting arm. The lieutenant dropped his rifle and grabbed his forearm, teeth clenched against a scream. Lieutenant's hit. We're pinned. We need extraction. Cole keyed his radio, shouting to be heard above the gunfire. Firebase Kodiak. Firebase Kodiak. This is Reaper 6. We are taking heavy contact at grid reference. Static. Nothing but static. The terrain was blocking their signal. The storm was eating their communications. They were alone. Evelyn Cross reached Vickers and immediately recognized the severity of the wound. The shrapnel had nicked his femoral artery, not a full severation, but enough to create a time bomb. Without surgical intervention, he had maybe 90 minutes, maybe less. Vickers, stay with me. Stay with me. She packed a wound, applied pressure, administered a morphine injector. Her hands moved with mechanical precision, her face betraying no emotion even as bullets cracked overhead and men screamed around her. Cole watched her work, and through the chaos of combat, a single thought crystallized in his mind. She's not afraid, not nervous, not overwhelmed, not even focused the way a trained professional will be focused in their first firefight. She was calm in a way that people were calm when they had been exactly here before, 100 times, 1,000 times, when the chaos of combat had become as familiar as breathing. Who are you? Cole whispered, too quiet for anyone else to hear. Evelyn Cross looked up, her gray eyes meeting his across 15 feet of blood-stained snow. She didn't answer. The firefight continued for another 23 minutes. By the time the enemy fire slackened, the SEAL team had expended 70% of their ammunition, sustained 4 casualties, and retreated twice to find defensible positions in the narrowing valley. They were trapped. The enemy had them boxed, firing positions on 3 sides, the precision sniper somewhere on the northeast ridge, and the storm closing in like a coffin lid. Extraction was impossible. Reinforcement was impossible. They couldn't go forward, couldn't go back, and couldn't stay where they were. Lieutenant Hale gathered what remained of his commandability and spoke into the radio. All elements, rally on my position. We need to assess and adapt. The survivors crawled, dragged, and limped toward the largest boulder formation in the valley. Cole helped Nash move while Evelyn guided Vickers, her small frame somehow supporting the weight of a 200-pound SEAL. Report. Hale said, his face pale from blood loss. Nash is stable, Evelyn said. Through and through deltoid, no arterial involvement. 6-hour window. Vickers, femoral nick. He needs surgery. 1 hour, maybe 90 minutes before he bleeds out internally. Extraction, radio's dead. The terrain and the storm are blocking everything. Even our emergency beacon isn't getting through. Cole checked his ammunition. I've got 3 magazines plus what's in the rifle. Maybe 60 rounds total. The other operators reported similar numbers. The team was down to approximately 200 rounds across 8 men, 4 of whom couldn't fight effectively. The sniper, Hale said, where is he? Northeast ridge, somewhere around 600 meters. That first shot was surgical. He knows what he's doing. Can we flank him? Not in this terrain. Not with this visibility. He'll pick us off before we get within 400 meters. Silence fell over the group, broken only by the howling wind and the distant crack of a rifle round. The sniper, reminding them he was still there, still watching, still waiting. We're going to die here, Nash said quietly. It wasn't fear in his voice. It was acceptance. Cole looked at the faces around him. Many had fought beside for years. Many would have followed into any hell on earth, and saw the same acceptance settling over them like a burial shroud. They were going to die on this mountain, and there was nothing any of them could do about it. And then Evelyn Cross stood up. No, she said. You're not. She walked to her medical pack, knelt in the snow, and began to open the sealed bottom compartment that Cole had noticed hours ago. "Cross, where are you?" "My name isn't Cross." She pulled out a rifle stock, black polymer, custom grip, weight distribution that spoke of precision engineering. "It's Mitchell, Sarah Mitchell." She pulled out a barrel, carbon fiber wrapped, threaded for a suppressor, length and caliber that Cole recognized immediately as purpose-built for extreme-range precision shooting. 3 years ago, I died in a helicopter crash over the Syria-Turkey border. At least, that's what the official records say. She pulled out a scope, Leupold Mark V, integrated ballistic computer, the kind of optic that cost more than most cars and was only issued to personnel who could justify its capabilities. In reality, I was extracted by CIA's Special Activities Division after 17 high-value target eliminations in 4 months. 147 confirmed kills across classified counterterrorism operations. She assembled a rifle with the fluid muscle memory of an artist handling their instrument. The components clicked together like they had been waiting for this moment. I tried to leave, tried to become someone who saves lives instead of ending them. I trained as a medic, built a new identity, buried everything I was. She stood up, the rifle in her hands, looking as natural as a limb. Her gray eyes were cold, empty, ancient with a kind of weariness that Cole recognized from looking in mirrors. But you can't outrun what you are. You can only embrace it or be destroyed by it. She met Cole's stare, and for the first time, he saw the truth behind the mask. This woman had killed more people than everyone in this valley combined. "The sniper on that ridge," she said. "His name is Dmitry Volov, former Spetsnaz, wanted in 3 countries for war crimes. He's one of the 5 best precision shooters in the world." "How do you know that?" "Because I'm one of the other 4. She moved toward the edge of their cover, scanning the ridge through her naked eye, calculating angles and distances and wind vectors that existed only in the minds of people who had trained their entire lives to this exact moment. "I need to reach that outcropping." She pointed to a rock formation 40 meters away, exposed, completely without cover. "It gives me angle on his position. I can make the shot." "That's suicide," Cole said. 40 meters of open ground with a world-class sniper waiting for movement. He won't expect it. He's disciplined, patient. He's waiting for us to make a mistake. He won't anticipate someone running directly into his kill zone. And if you're wrong, Sarah Mitchell, the woman who had called herself Evelyn Cross, looked at him with eyes that had seen more death than he could imagine. "Then I died doing what I was made for. Either way, you survive." She didn't wait for permission. She moved. The next 4 seconds existed outside of time, a frozen eternity where every heartbeat stretched into hours and every breath lasted years. Sarah broke cover and ran. Her boots churned through the knee-deep snow, her body low and fast, the rifle cradled against her chest. 40 meters of open ground, 600 meters of exposed angle to a sniper who had already proven he could kill at that range. Crack. A round snapped past her head, close enough to part her hair. She didn't flinch, didn't slow, didn't deviate from her course. Crack! The second round hit the snow 3 inches from her left boot, kicking up a spray of white powder. She was 20 meters from the outcropping now, her lungs burning, her legs screaming. Crack! The third round grazed her ribs. She felt the impact, a hammer blow that cracked at least 2 bones and sent a lance of white-hot pain through her chest. Her stride faltered for half a second, and then she pushed through it. Because she had been shot before, had been stabbed before, had been burned and broken and beaten, and none of it had ever stopped her. She reached the outcropping and dropped behind it, gasping for breath, blood seeping from the wound in her side. Behind her, she could hear Cole shouting, "Cross! Cross, are you hit?" She didn't answer. She was already bringing the rifle up, already settling into her shooting position, already beginning the calculations that would determine whether 8 men lived or died. Distance, 620 meters. Confirmed via rangefinder. Wind, 40 knots, gusting to 48, direction northeast by north. Angle, negative 15 degrees elevation. Bullet velocity, 2,800 feet per second. Wind lead compensation, 3.22 meters ahead of target. She found him. Dmitry Volov was positioned behind a snow-covered boulder on the northeast ridge, his own rifle trained on the sealed position. He was good, perhaps the best she'd ever faced, but he had made a single mistake. He had assumed she was a corpseman. He had dismissed her as a non-threat. He had stopped watching her the moment she broke cover, confident that his rounds would find her before she could reach any position of advantage. Sarah Mitchell exhaled slowly, feeling her heart rate drop from 180 to 60 in the space of 3 breaths. The pain in her ribs faded to background noise. The howling wind became data rather than obstacle. The chaos of combat simplified into a single point of focus. One shot, one target, one life against 147 that had come before. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder, and 2,800 feet per second, a precisely manufactured death, crossed 620 meters of frozen mountain air. The bullet fought through the 40-knot crosswind, climbing slightly against a negative elevation angle, traveling for exactly 0.72 seconds before it found its target. Dmitry Volov's head snapped back, and he crumpled behind his boulder. 148. The effect on the battlefield was immediate. The enemy forces, suddenly without their overwatch, their tactical coordinator, their most valuable asset, began to falter. The coordinated suppressing fire became sporadic. The flanking elements hesitated. And then, from somewhere in the chaos, a voice shouted in accented English, a commander realizing that everything had changed. Pull back, pull back. The hostiles began to retreat, melting into the blizzard like ghosts. Within 3 minutes, the valley was silent except for the wind. Sarah lay behind her outcropping, breathing in shallow gasps against the pain in her ribs. Blood was seeping through her jacket, staining the snow beneath her. She stared up at the gray sky and waited. Cole Rayner reached her first. He dropped to his knees beside her, hands already moving toward the wound. Jesus Christ. You're hit. Why didn't you say? It's not fatal. Her voice was flat, distant. The bullet deflected off the rib. Cracked 2, maybe 3. Hurts, but I'm functional. Cole stared at her face, at the absolute absence of emotion in her gray eyes, and realized he was looking at someone who had been wounded so many times that pain had become merely another variable to be managed. Who sent you? He asked. This wasn't a random assignment. You were placed with us. Colonel Patricia Winters, Defense Intelligence Agency. She received intelligence that Volov was operating in this sector and suspected he would be covering the contractor extraction. I was a contingency that nobody told us about. Need to know, Staff Sergeant. You need to know. Cole wanted to be angry. He wanted to rage at the deception, at the manipulation, at the knowledge that his entire team had been used as bait to draw at a target. But he looked at the woman bleeding in the snow, at the rifle that had just saved 8 lives, and he found that anger required more energy than he had left. Can you walk? I can walk. He helped her to her feet, and together they made their way back to the boulder formation where the rest of the team was providing emergency medical care for the wounded. Hale looked up as they approached, his face a mass of pain and exhaustion. The shooter? Down, Sarah said. Dmitry Volov. He won't be killing anyone else. How did you? Later, Lieutenant. Right now, we need to move. The enemy forces have retreated, but they'll regroup. We have maybe 45 minutes before they come back in force. We can't carry the wounded 2 clicks through this terrain. You can and you will. Sarah's voice carried the quiet authority of someone accustomed to command. Vickers needs surgery within the hour. We move now or we leave him. Nobody suggested leaving him. The march to LZ Bravo took 90 minutes. 90 minutes of brutal, grinding effort through knee-deep snow and treacherous terrain, with 4 wounded men being half-carried by their teammates. Sarah walked at the rear, her rifle slung across her back, her hand pressed against the wound in her side. Cole stayed close to her, watching for any sign that she was about to collapse. She didn't. She just kept walking, one foot in front of the other, like a machine that didn't know how to stop. Syria-Turkey border. He said eventually, 147 kills and how long? 3 years, give or take. How old were you when they recruited you? 18, fresh out of high school. I was a competitive shooter, national level, junior championships. Someone noticed my scores and made me an offer I was too young to understand. And you said yes. I said yes. I was good at it. Cole, better than anyone they'd ever seen. That's the curse, being exceptional at something terrible. They couldn't let me go because I was irreplaceable. And I couldn't leave because they made sure I had no identity outside the mission. But you did leave. I died. Sarah Mitchell was officially Kia in a helicopter crash. The body was never recovered because there was no body. I was extracted, debriefed, and given a choice: continue the mission forever or disappear into a new life. I chose a new life. Evelyn Cross was born 6 months later. And yet you're here, with a rifle in your pack and a target in your scope. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. The wind howled around them, and the snow continued to fall. They never really let me go, she said finally. The extraction, the new identity, it was all conditional. When Volov surfaced in this sector, they activated me. One last mission, they said. Just this once, they said. They always say that. And after this, what happens to Evelyn Cross? She dies, just like Sarah Mitchell did 3 years ago. The government will seal my service record, revoke my medical certification, and transfer me to a facility that doesn't appear on any map. There's a new target in the Hindu Kush. High value. They need someone who can make impossible shots in impossible conditions. And you'll go. I'll go. Because they're right, Cole. I am irreplaceable. And the alternative is spending the rest of my life running from what I am. They walked in silence after that. There was nothing more to say. LZ Bravo was a clearing on the western slope of the ridge, barely large enough for a single UH-60 to set down. The extraction bird arrived 18 minutes after they reached a rally point, a beautiful, thundering angel of rotor wash and hydraulic wine. Cole helped load the wounded into the cargo bay, watching as corpsmen from Firebase Kodiak began emergency treatment on Vickers and Nash. Hale was already on a stretcher, his shattered arm immobilized, his face gray with pain. Sarah Mitchell stood apart from the others, her rifle case secured to her back, her gray eyes distant. Cross. Cole caught her arm. Sarah, whoever you are, thank you. She looked at him, and for just a moment, something human flickered behind the mask. Keep them safe, Cole. That's all that matters. And who keeps you safe? Nobody. That's the deal. She pulled away from him and walked toward a different helicopter, a smaller bird that had arrived separately, painted in colors that Cole didn't recognize and bearing no identifying marks. Colonel Patricia Winters stood beside it, waiting. The debriefing lasted 4 hours. Sarah sat in a concrete room beneath Firebase Kodiak, facing a woman whose file she had memorized years ago. Colonel Patricia Winters was 62 years old, a 30-year veteran of Defense Intelligence Operations, and one of the 7 people in the world who knew Sarah Mitchell's true identity. Volov is confirmed eliminated, Winters said. His body was recovered from the ridge 6 hours after extraction. Single shot, center mass through the cranial vault. Exceptional shooting, even by your standards. The conditions were suboptimal. The conditions were impossible. 40-knot crosswind, negative elevation, 620 meters, through a blizzard. No one else could have made that shot. Someone else should have been trained to make it. Someone else was. They're dead. You're not. That's the difference. Sarah said nothing. She had learned long ago that argument was useless against institutional logic. The team survived, Winters continued. All 8 men, for wounded, but all recoverable. Vickers will be medically retired. The femoral damage was too extensive for full function, but the others will return to duty within 6 months. You saved their lives. I killed 1 man to save 8. The math doesn't balance. Math isn't the point, Mitchell. Results are the point. You delivered results. What happens to Evelyn Cross? Winters pulled a folder from her briefcase and slid it across the table. Petty Officer Evelyn Cross's service record has been sealed at the highest classification level. Her medical certification has been revoked pending investigation. Officially, she's being transferred to administrative duties, an undisclosed location. And unofficially, Evelyn Cross never existed. The identity was a shell, and the shell has been collapsed. Sarah Mitchell is active again. Sarah Mitchell died 3 years ago. Sarah Mitchell is whatever we need her to be. Right now, we need her to be a precision shooter operating in the Hindu Kush region. There's a target, a logistics coordinator for a major terrorist network, who has evaded capture for 6 years. His compound is in a valley that's inaccessible to drone strikes and too dangerous for conventional special operations. But not too dangerous for one woman with a rifle. Nothing is too dangerous for you, Mitchell. That's the problem and the solution. Sarah stared at the folder without opening it. The weight of 148 kills pressed against her chest, heavier than the cracked ribs. I tried to leave, she said quietly. I tried to become something else. Someone who heals instead of kills. I know. I read the psychological evaluations. You genuinely believed you could escape your nature. Can I? Winter's expression softened slightly, a rare crack in professional mask. Some people are built for ordinary lives. They can love, raise families, grow old surrounded by the people they've saved. Those people have a gift for normalcy. And me, you have a different gift, the ability to end lives with precision and detachment. The psychological profile, to survive the weight of it, the discipline to do it again and again without breaking. That gift makes you extraordinary and irreplaceable, but also makes a normal life impossible. You tried to be a healer for 6 weeks, and the first time violence found you, you became exactly what you were trained to be. I saved them. You did, but you saved them by killing, not by healing. The shot that mattered wasn't a tourniquet or an injection. It was a bullet through a man's skull from 620 meters. Sarah closed her eyes. The faces appeared behind her eyelids. 148 faces, stretching back across a decade of shadows and silence. When does it stop? When your skills degrade beyond usefulness, or when a target proves better than you, or when the mission priorities shift away from human assets toward technological solutions. 20 years, maybe 30, at which point you'll be given a new identity, a pension, and a cottage somewhere far from civilization where you can pretend the nightmares are just dreams. That's the best case scenario. Yes. The worst case is that you die on a mission, and we pretend you never existed at all. Sarah opened her eyes and looked at the folder in front of her. She already knew she was going to open it, already knew she was going to memorize the target's face, study the terrain, calculate the angles. She had tried to escape what she was. She had failed. One question, she said. Go ahead. The team. Hale, Cole, Nash, the others. What happens to them? They'll be debriefed and sworn to secrecy. The official mission report will indicate that hostile forces were eliminated by combined team fire. Your involvement will be classified at the highest level, so they can never talk about what they saw. Correct. For the rest of their lives. They'll carry the knowledge of what you are, and they'll never be able to share it with anyone. Sarah nodded slowly. It was the kindest fate she could offer them, the burden of a secret rather than the danger of association with a ghost. One more thing, she said. The chapel at Firebase Kodiak. I want 30 minutes before the transfer. Winters considered for a moment, then nodded. Granted, 30 minutes. Sarah picked up the folder and walked out of the debriefing room. The chapel was small, a converted storage container with wooden benches and a simple cross at the front. It smelled like dust and old hymnals, and the lighting came from a single bulb that cast everything in amber shadows. Sarah sat in the back row, the folder unopened in her lap, and tried to remember how to pray. She had been raised Catholic. Technically, her parents had taken her to Mass on Easter and Christmas, had enrolled her in Sunday school until she was 12, had given her a Bible for her confirmation that she had never opened. God felt very far away now. He had felt far away for a long time. The door opened behind her. She didn't turn. Cole Rayner walked down the aisle and sat on the bench beside her, leaving 2 feet of space between them. He was cleaned up now, his wounds treated, his uniform replaced. But his eyes were tired in a way that soap and fresh clothes couldn't fix. They told me you were leaving, he said. I'm being transferred. To where? Nowhere that has a name. Cole nodded. He had been in the military long enough to understand what that meant. The men want to thank you, he said. Nash, Ortiz, Hale, they want to see you before you go. Tell you what you did for them. I can't. Operational security. They know that. They asked me to tell you anyway. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. The amber light flickered, and somewhere outside, a generator hummed. Tell them I was doing my job, she said finally. Tell them any of them would have done the same. They wouldn't have. Couldn't have. What you did, the shot you made, nobody else in that valley was capable of it. That's the tragedy, isn't it? Being the only one who can do something terrible means you can never stop doing it. Cole studied her profile in the dim light. The sharp lines of her face, the gray eyes that reflected nothing, the absolute stillness that he now understood was a result of years of training the humanity out of herself. "You told me you tried to leave," he said. "Try to become a healer instead of a killer." "I did." "Did it work?" For even a moment, Sarah considered the question. On the mountain, in the chaos of the ambush, she had treated Nash's wound, stabilized Vickers, administered morphine, and applied tourniquets. She had done the work of a corpsman, the work she had trained for during 6 months of medical schooling. And then she had picked up a rifle and done the work she had been born for. "There was a moment," she said slowly, "when I was packing Vickers' wound. His eyes were glazing and his pulse was thready, and I knew he had maybe 90 minutes before the internal bleeding killed him. I stabilized him. I gave him a chance. That's what medics do." "Yes." And for 30 seconds, I felt like that was enough. Like maybe I could be the person who kept people alive instead of the person who ended them. What changed? Volov's rifle cracked again, and Ortiz started screaming, and I realized that every second I spent healing was a second the sniper spent killing. The math didn't work. It never works. One healer can't balance one killer. You need someone willing to kill the killer. So you became the killer. I never stopped being the killer. I just pretended for a while. Cole was quiet. Outside, the wind was picking up, the tail edge of the storm system that had nearly killed them on Valken Ridge. "I've been in combat for 18 years, he said. 18 deployments across 4 continents. I've killed more men than I can count, and I've watched more friends die than I want to remember. But I've never felt what you described, the weight of being irreplaceable, the knowledge that nobody else can do what you do. Consider yourself lucky. Is that what it is? Luck. It's ordinary skill. You're exceptional at your job, but you're not unique. There are other soldiers who can do what you do. Maybe not as well, but close enough that the mission would succeed without you. That's freedom. The ability to fail without catastrophe. I've never had that. What happens when you fail? People die who shouldn't. Targets escape who go on to kill hundreds, thousands. Operations collapse because the critical shot wasn't made. I've only failed twice in my career. Both times, the consequences were measured in body counts. And you carry that. Everyone carries something. This is what I carry. Cole leaned back on the wooden bench, staring at the simple cross at the front of the chapel. He had never been particularly religious, but moments like this made him understand why people reached for something larger than themselves. "The men will remember you," he said. "Whatever the official record says, whatever lies we're forced to tell, they'll remember that a woman they thought was a rookie medic turned out to be a ghost who saved their lives. That matters." "Does it?" "To them. Maybe not to you, but to them." Sarah finally looked at him. Her gray eyes held something that might have been grief or gratitude or the exhausted acceptance of someone who had stopped fighting. "Tell them I was glad to be there," she said. "Tell them that for one moment, on that mountain, I got to be part of a team again. Not a solitary weapon. Not a ghost. Just someone who belonged. I'll tell them." She stood up, the folder tucked under her arm. The debriefing was over. The mission was complete. The next chapter of her endless war was about to begin. "Sarah," Cole's voice stopped her at the door. "If you ever get out, really get out, look me up. I'll buy you a beer and tell you stories about all the lives you saved. I won't get out. But if you do..." She paused, her hand on the door frame. A ghost of a smile crossed her face, the first genuine emotion he had seen from her since the moment she had assembled that rifle in the snow. "If I do," she said, "I'll find you." She walked out of the chapel and into the night. 30 minutes later, a helicopter with no identifying marks lifted off from Firebase Kodiak, carrying a woman who didn't officially exist toward a mission that would never be acknowledged. Cole watched it go, standing on the edge of the landing pad with the wind cutting through his jacket. He stayed there until the lights disappeared into the clouds, and then he turned and walked back toward the medical bay where his team was recovering. 3 weeks later, Cole Rayner stood on the outcropping where Sarah Mitchell had made the impossible shot. He had returned to Valken Ridge alone, hiking up from the valley floor through terrain that was now peaceful under a blanket of fresh snow. The storm had passed and the sky was clear, and the only sound was the distant cry of wind across the peaks. The granite was cold beneath his boots. The blood had long since been washed away, and the shell casing, the single brass witness to what happened here, had been recovered by the intelligence team during their sweep of the battlefield. There was no evidence that Sarah Mitchell had ever been here. No evidence that a woman with gray eyes and 148 kills had lain in this exact spot, cracked ribs bleeding, and calculated a trajectory that would save 8 lives. The mountain kept no records. It didn't care about the stories written on its slopes. Cole stood there for a long time, staring at the ridge where Dmitry Vlov had died. 620 meters, 40-knot crosswind, negative 15-degree elevation. Conditions that should have made the shot impossible. She had made it anyway, because that was what ghosts did. They accomplished the impossible, and then they vanished, and the world continued on as if they had never existed. "Thank you," Cole said quietly, to the empty air, to the snow, to the ghosts who would never hear him. He turned and began the long hike down, somewhere over the Hindu Kush, an altitude that didn't appear on flight plans. Sarah Mitchell reviewed the contents of her mission folder. The target was a logistics coordinator named Hassan al-Rashid, 52 years old, 3 children, 14 years as the primary financial conduit for a network responsible for at least 6 major terrorist attacks across Europe and Asia. His compound sat in a valley that was surrounded by mountains on 3 sides and guarded by a force of approximately 35 armed men. The recommended engagement distance was 1,100 meters. The shot would need to be made through a mountain pass that created unpredictable wind conditions. The exfiltration plan involved a 4-hour solo hike through hostile territory to a pickup point that could only be accessed at night. Impossible. Everyone would say it was impossible. Sarah closed the folder and looked out the window at the darkness below. 149, she thought. Then 150. Then however many more until they're done with me, or I'm done with everything. She had tried to escape what she was. She had built a new identity, trained as a healer, convinced herself that the weight of 147 kills could be balanced by the lives she saved. It couldn't. The math never worked. One healer couldn't balance one killer. The only thing that could balance a killer was another killer, someone willing to do the terrible calculus of ending one life to save many. That was what she was, what she had always been. What she would be until the day some target proved better than her, or her skills degraded, or the government decided she was more liability than asset. The helicopter banked toward the mountains, and Sarah Mitchell, ghost weapon, irreplaceable asset, closed her eyes and waited for the next mission to begin. Below her, invisible in the darkness, the world continued on without her. People woke and slept and loved and grieved and never knew that somewhere in the shadows, someone was doing the terrible work that kept them safe. That was the bargain. That was the price. And Sarah Mitchell paid it again and again because she was the only one who could. The sun rose over fire-based Kodiak, painting the mountains in shades of gold and rose. In the medical bay, Lieutenant Marcus Hale was beginning physical therapy for his shattered radius. Nash was sleeping off the last of his medication, his deltoid wound healing clean. Ortiz was dictating a letter to his daughter, trying to find words for the things he had seen without saying the things he couldn't. Vickers was gone, medically evacuated to a hospital in Germany, where surgeons were doing their best to save what remained of his leg. He would never walk without a limp. He would never return to combat operations. But he was alive, and that was more than the mountain should have allowed. Cole Rayner sat by the window in the recovery room, watching the sunrise and thinking about ghosts. The official after-action report had been filed. It described a hostile engagement in the Valken Ridge sector. Enemy forces eliminated by combined team fire. No friendly casualties. Petty Officer Evelyn Cross was mentioned as a medical corpsman who provided outstanding emergency treatment to wounded personnel. Her transfer to administrative duties was noted without explanation. Nobody would ever read the truth in any official document. Nobody would ever know that a woman with 148 kills had assembled a precision rifle from a hidden compartment in her medical pack and made a shot that the laws of physics should have forbidden. That was how it worked. That was how it had always worked. The heroes who saved the world were never acknowledged. The warriors who did the impossible were erased from the record. The ghosts slipped back into the shadows, and the world went on pretending they didn't exist. Cole thought about Sarah's eyes, the gray emptiness behind them, the weight of every face she had ever seen through a scope. He thought about her words in the chapel. I was glad to be there. For one moment, I got to be part of a team again. She had wanted connection. She had wanted belonging. She had wanted desperately to be more than a weapon, to be a person who mattered for reasons other than her ability to kill. And the world had taken that from her because her ability to kill was too valuable to waste on ordinary humanity. Cole raised his coffee cup in a silent toast to the sunrise, to the woman who had saved his life, to the ghost who had vanished into the mountains and would never return. Thank you, he said again, because it was all he could offer. Somewhere, he hoped she could hear him. The Hindu Kush stretched below Sarah Mitchell like a frozen ocean, all jagged peaks and shadowed valleys and terrain that killed empires for 1,000 years. She was rappelling down a cliff face in the pre-dawn darkness. Her rifle case secured her back, her breath misting in the frozen air. The insertion had gone smoothly. The helicopter had dropped her 3 kilometers from the target compound, in a location that satellite reconnaissance indicated was unmonitored. She had 4 hours to reach her shooting position, make the shot, and begin the exfiltration to the pickup point. 4 hours. 1 shot. Then the long walk home. If home was the right word for a classified facility that didn't appear on maps, staffed by people who used code names instead of real identities, doing work that would never be acknowledged by the government that ordered it. Sarah's boots hit the snow at the base of the cliff, and she began moving. The terrain was brutal, worse than Valken Ridge, worse than most of the places she had operated over the years. But her body knew how to move through hostile ground, how to conserve energy, how to find the paths that offered the best combination of speed and concealment. This was what she was made for. This was the thing she did better than anyone else in the world. And as she moved through the darkness toward her target, Sarah Mitchell accepted, finally, completely, the truth she had been running from for years. She would never be free. She would never be ordinary. She would never sit in a chapel and pray to a God who seemed very far away. She was a ghost, a weapon, a precise and terrible instrument of policy. And the only peace she would ever find was the peace of acceptance, the knowledge that what she did mattered, even if no one would ever acknowledge it. 149 kills, then 150, then however many more until the end. The sun was rising over the Hindu Kush, and Sarah Mitchell moved toward her target with the quiet, relentless certainty of someone who had finally stopped fighting what she was. Behind her, invisible in the growing light, the mountain kept its secrets, just like it always did. In Bethesda, Maryland, a woman named Margaret Cross received a letter with no return address. The handwriting was unfamiliar. The postmark was from a small town in Wyoming that she had never heard of. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 4 words written in careful script. I'm alive. I'm sorry. Margaret stared at the letter for a long time. She didn't know anyone in Wyoming. She didn't know anyone who would send her anonymous notes. Her life was ordinary. A nursing job at a retirement home, a small apartment, a cat named Walter who slept on the sunny spots on the carpet. But something about those words tugged at the edges of her memory. Something about the careful curves of the handwriting. Her younger sister had written like that once, before the military had taken her, before the helicopter crash that had left nothing to bury, before the flag-draped ceremony at a cemetery where Margaret had stood alone, wondering why the government had never returned a body. Sarah, she thought. Oh, Sarah. She held the letter to her chest and cried for the first time in 3 years. Somewhere over the Atlantic, on a military transport that officially didn't exist, Sarah Mitchell stared out the window at the clouds and thought about the letter she had sent. It was a violation of protocol. It was security risk. It was exactly the kind of emotional weakness that her handlers had spent years training out of her. But Margaret was the last connection she had to the person she used to be. The last living proof that Sarah Mitchell had once been a girl who went to Sunday school and won shooting competitions and dreamed of becoming an Olympic athlete. That girl was gone now, buried under 149 kills, and a decade of shadows and silence. But she had existed, once. And Margaret deserved to know that her death, Sarah's official death, the death that had been carefully staged to erase her from the world, wasn't the whole story. The transport banked toward its destination, and Sarah closed her eyes. Tomorrow, there would be another briefing, another target, another impossible shot in impossible conditions. But today, she allowed herself one moment of humanity, One connection to the person she might have been. Then she let it go, because ghosts couldn't afford to hold on to the living. Cole Rayner received his discharge papers 6 months after Valken Ridge. 20 years of service, 18 deployments, countless operations that would never be acknowledged, and awards that would never be displayed. He stood in his empty apartment in Virginia Beach, looking at the folded flag and the classified commendations and the memories that nobody would ever hear about, and thought about a woman with gray eyes who had made an impossible shot through a blizzard. The official record said Evelyn Cross had been transferred to administrative duties. The official record said nothing about a custom sniper rifle or a CIA asset with 148 kills, or a ghost who had saved 8 lives and vanished into mountains. But Cole remembered. He would always remember. He poured himself a whiskey and raised a glass to the window, where the sun was setting over the ocean in shades of gold and crimson. "To the ghosts," he said quietly. "May they find peace." Somewhere in the world, he hoped she could hear him. The extraction helicopter lifted off from the Hindu Kush at 0347 local time, carrying Sarah Mitchell and the classified after-action report of Operation Silent Thunder. Target neutralized. One shot. 1,147 meters. Hassan al-Rashid had been standing on his balcony, watching the sunrise, when the bullet crossed a mountain pass and found him. He had fallen without a sound, and his guards had spent 15 minutes searching for a shooter who was already 3 kilometers away and moving toward extraction. 149. Sarah sat in the cargo bay of the helicopter, her rifle case between her knees, her eyes closed. The adrenaline was fading and a familiar emptiness was settling in, the post-mission void where her mind processed what she'd done and filed away with all the other faces. Colonel Winters was waiting when the helicopter landed at the forward operating base. "Clean shot," she said. "Al-Rashid's network is already showing signs of collapse. You disrupted a major terrorist logistics chain. How many lives?" "Excuse me? How many lives did this save? What's the estimate?" Winters hesitated, then checked her tablet. Intelligence assessment suggests Al-Rashid was coordinating funding for at least 3 planned attacks over the next 18 months. Conservative estimate is 600 potential casualties prevented, 600 lives saved, 1 life taken. The math balanced. For once, the math balanced. Sarah nodded slowly, something releasing in her chest that she hadn't realized she was holding. "Good," she said. "That's good." She walked past Winters toward the barracks, toward the bunk where she would sleep for a few hours before the next briefing, the next target, the next mission. Behind her, Winters watched her go with an expression that might have been respect or pity, or the complicated mixture of both that came from working with people who existed outside normal human parameters. "Get some rest, Mitchell," she said quietly. "You've earned it." Sarah didn't hear her. She was already moving, already preparing, already calculating the endless equation of lives taken and lives saved. That was what ghosts did. They moved through the shadows, balancing scales that ordinary people never saw. And when the work was done, they vanished, just like they always did. The memorial service at Firebase Kodiak was small and private, just the surviving members of the Valken Ridge operation, and a few support personnel who had been cleared for the basic details. They gathered in the chapel, in the amber light where Sarah Mitchell had sat 3 weeks earlier, and they spoke about the mission in the careful, circumscribed way that classified operations required. Lieutenant Hale spoke first, his arm still in a sling, but his voice steady. "We went into that valley expecting to rescue 3 contractors. We walked into an ambush that should have killed every one of us. We survived because of good training, good teammates, and..." He paused, searching for words that wouldn't violate security protocols. "And because sometimes the universe sends you exactly what you need, exactly when you need it, even if you don't understand it at the time." Nash went next, his deltoid wound healing, but still tender. "I've been in combat for 12 years. I've seen men do impossible things under pressure, but I've never seen anything like what I saw on that ridge. I don't know who she was. I don't know where she came from, but I know she saved my life, and I know I'll never forget her." Cole was last. He stood at the front of the chapel, looking at the faces of men he had fought beside, men he would have died for, men who had been seconds from death before a ghost had appeared from nowhere and tipped the scales. "There are people in this world," he said slowly, "who carry burdens that the rest of us can't imagine. They do the impossible. They sacrifice everything, their identities, their peace, their chance at normal lives, because they're the only ones who can. He paused, thinking about gray eyes and a rifle assembled from nothing and a shot that should have been impossible. We'll never be able to thank her properly. We'll never be able to tell her story or acknowledge what she did or give her the recognition she deserves. But we can remember. We can carry the knowledge of what she was, even if we can never speak it aloud. And we can try every day for the rest of our lives to be worthy of the gift she gave us. He raised his hand in a salute, not to the room, but to the empty air, to the ghost who wasn't there, to the ones who walk in shadows, to the ones who do the terrible work, to the ones who save us and vanish without a trace. The room was silent for a long moment. Then, one by one, every man in the chapel raised his hand in the same salute. And somewhere in the world, in a classified facility that didn't appear on maps, a woman with gray eyes paused in her work and felt something, a warmth, a connection, a moment of recognition from across the vast distance. She didn't know what it was. She couldn't have known. But for just a moment, she didn't feel alone. Then the moment passed, and she returned to her work, because there was always more work to be done, always more scales to balance, always more shadows to walk through. That was the life of a ghost. And Sarah Mitchell, weapon, asset, irreplaceable instrument of policy, had finally accepted it, not with joy, not with peace, but with the quiet certainty of someone who had stopped fighting what she was. You can't outrun your nature, she had said in the snow. You can only embrace it or be destroyed by it. She had chosen to embrace it. And in the end, that was the only choice that had ever mattered. The sun set over fire-based Kodiak, painting the mountains in shades of purple and gold. The memorial service ended, and the men returned to their duties, carrying the weight of a secret they would never be allowed to share. And on a ridge somewhere in the distance, the wind blew across empty stone, erasing the last traces of what had happened there. The mountain kept no records. It never did. But the men who had survived would remember. And in the quiet moments, when the noise of the world faded and the memories surfaced, they would think about a woman with gray eyes who had made an impossible shot through a blizzard. A woman who had saved them. A woman who had vanished. A ghost. The helicopter carrying Sarah Mitchell crossed into international airspace at 0623 local time. Below her, the mountains faded into distance, and ahead of her, the next mission waited. She didn't look back. Ghosts never did.